In Washington, a fiery exchange exploded when Senator Elissa Slotkin confronted Governor Kristi Noem, acting in her role as a Trump-era immigration official. What began as a simple question quickly spiraled into one of the most heated debates over constitutional rights, government overreach, and even the dignity of American citizenship itself. And by the end of it, Slotkin had ripped open a series of revelations that went far beyond deportations. This was about power, politics, and how far leaders are willing to go in the name of security. It started with a gut-wrenching accusation. Slotkin claimed that under Noem's watch, American citizens, including children battling illnesses, had been deported.
And even American citizens. And when I think about that, you know, there are lots of people in this country, including me, who have families who fled this kind of environment where they have no rights, where they have no due process, where they don't have habeas corpus. So while I'll be the first to say, coming from a state that was won by Trump, that there is a mandate to do something about the border, I think it is absolute dangerous overreach to go beyond that and start picking up American citizens and people who have the legal right to be here, lawful immigrants who have done everything right. So first and foremost, do you acknowledge that your department has made some mistakes, any mistakes, in going after either American citizens or legal immigrants here in the time that you've been in office?
We have not deported any U.S. citizens.
Detained?
Or people get interviewed. If they get interviewed and they go through that process and we find that they're U.S. citizens or legal immigrants, they stay in the United States.
Have you deported
we have to go through the vetting process.
Have any American citizens, including children, been deported during your time in office?
We have children that mothers have chosen to keep with them. So those
by my count, you have 10 American citizens, including children with cancer, who have been deported out of the country. I understand you're saying it's their choice.
But
it's hard to imagine a small child having a choice. But have you gone after legal immigrants? Again, your standard in your opening statement was the most dangerous illegal immigrants. Does that include PhD students and master's students at colleges across the country, unarmed? Are they the most dangerous illegal when they have status and no weapons?
I don't decide who gets status through a student program. The Department of State decides that, and we enforce it.
Oh, come on.
That's what our Department of Homeland Security does.
I just would offer that, again, I have no qualms with going after folks who are here illegally. That is not my concern. That was part of my job, was to prevent people from coming here illegally in a former life. My concern is you're sending a chill down the spine of America by going after people who either have legal status or American citizens. And when my colleagues ask you about habeas corpus, and you say, literally, we can review the tape, that you believe it's a right the president has, you sat here in front of all of us and swore an oath to the Constitution, and that is not at all what habeas corpus is. It is a right that we all get, that American citizens get, that people who are in the United States legally have. So my concern is, it's complete overreach. I don't think American citizens, even those who voted for Trump, believe that you should be able to just grab someone off the street, sloppy, who has the legal right to be here, and certainly an American citizen. And I just am concerned that while you say you're going after the most dangerous folks, what you're actually doing is going after folks for political reasons, right? A PhD student that's unarmed is not at the top of the list.
And we're not deporting U.S. citizens, and we're not deporting people who have legal status here.
10 American citizens
If the children have gone with their parents, it's because their parents wanted them with them. So let me ask you another question about cybersecurity. You know, you've cut $500 million from the budget. What specific programs are you cutting? Because there are programs that really aid states and locals that we depend on for cybersecurity. And we know that right now, while we may have...
One case she highlighted involved a 4-year-old with stage 4 cancer expelled from the country alongside their parent. The senator's words cut through the chamber like a blade. By my count, 10 American citizens, including children with cancer, have been deported out of the country. Noem, clearly rattled, tried to reframe the issue. She insisted that it wasn't deportation at all, but rather parents choosing to take their children when removed from the country. But Slotkin pushed back hard, reminding everyone listening that a sick child doesn't really get to choose. The tension was palpable, And as Noem doubled down insisting that we have not deported U.S. citizens, Slotkin's frustration only grew, because the defense sounded less like accountability and more like evasion. But that wasn't the only moment that shocked the room. When the senator pressed Noem on constitutional protections, the debate turned explosive. Slotkin asked about habeas corpus, the right of every person in the U.S. to challenge unlawful detention. It's one of the most fundamental guarantees in American law, a safeguard against unchecked executive power. But Noem, in an astonishing move, claimed that habeas corpus was essentially a right the president has. Slotkin froze. The chamber froze. This wasn't just a misstatement. It was a reimagining of the Constitution itself, flipping a basic protection into a tool of presidential authority. Slotkin, visibly outraged, reminded Noem that habeas corpus is not granted by the president, nor is it his to wield. It's the birthright of every person on U.S. soil, citizen or immigrant alike. The clash revealed something deeply unsettling: an administration willing to bend legal definitions to expand executive power. And the questions didn't stop there. Slotkin pressed further, asking if the so-called dangerous illegal immigrants the administration claimed to be targeting actually included law-abiding PhD students and master's students, people studying in American universities with legal status and no history of violence. Her words dripped with sarcasm. Are unarmed graduate students the most dangerous immigrants in America? It was a devastating question because it exposed the absurdity of lumping educated legal immigrants into the same category as violent criminals. Noem sidestepped again, insisting it wasn't her department's responsibility, blaming the State Department for deciding visa status. But that response raised more red flags than it resolved. If the government's deportation machine was sweeping up students and scholars, then this wasn't about public safety, it was about political narratives. And the message being sent to immigrants was chilling: even if you do everything right, you're not safe. But then came one of the most bizarre revelations of all. Reports began surfacing that within the Department of Homeland Security, proposals had circulated for a reality TV show in which immigrants would compete for U.S. citizenship. Yes, you heard that correctly. Citizenship, reduced to a televised contest, complete with all the spectacle and cruelty of a game show. Noem denied the report outright, calling it false. But she also admitted that such proposals may have circulated inside DHS without her knowledge. That admission alone was enough to spark outrage. Because even if the idea never made it to air, the fact that it was discussed at all inside government halls shows a disturbing cultural shift, turning the immigrant experience into entertainment and reducing human dignity to ratings and propaganda. Slotkin seized on that moment, painting it as a grotesque example of how immigration policy was being hijacked for political theater. And if all of that wasn't enough, the senator pivoted to another flashpoint: cybersecurity. At a time when the nation faces escalating cyber attacks from foreign adversaries, DHS had slashed nearly $500 million from cyber defense programs. Slotkin, representing Michigan, a state that relies heavily on federal cyber support for infrastructure protection, called it reckless. You cannot claim this is the most cyber-secure administration while gutting programs that protect my state and yours, she declared. Noem tried to defend the cuts as a realignment, but the explanation rang hollow. The timing couldn't have been worse. Foreign hackers are ramping up attacks on U.S. grids, pipelines and local governments, and yet federal support is shrinking. To Slotkin, this wasn't just bad policy. It was a betrayal, because when cyber protections crumble, ordinary Americans are the ones left exposed. Piece by piece, Slotkin pulled the curtain back on something larger than just deportations or budget cuts. What she described was a dangerous pattern: deporting sick children while pretending it was choice, misusing constitutional language to inflate presidential powers, targeting legal students as though they were criminals, entertaining dystopian game show concepts about citizenship, and gutting cyber defenses at the very moment they were most needed. Each piece alone might spark outrage. Together they painted a portrait of governance that valued spectacle over substance, politics over principle, and control over constitutional rights. And that's why this exchange struck such a nerve. It wasn't just about one policy mistake or one department error. It was about a bigger question: how far is the government willing to go when fear and power become the driving forces of policy? Slotkin made it clear that what's happening isn't about national security anymore. It's about manufacturing fear, turning human lives into props, and normalizing authoritarian overreach. The senator's final words hit hard. Even those who voted for Trump do not believe you should be able to grab someone off the street who has the legal right to be here. This isn't about law enforcement, it's about overreach. By the end, the hearing had shifted from a policy discussion into a public reckoning. Noem's defenses only reinforced the senator's point that constitutional rights were being trampled, that citizens and lawful immigrants were being caught in the dragnet, and that cybersecurity, America's digital shield, was being sacrificed for political talking points. Slotkin's fiery line of questioning ensured that these issues couldn't just be brushed aside as routine governance, they were spotlighted as dangerous precedents that threatened the very foundation of American democracy. So the real question now isn't whether mistakes were made, it's whether this is a pattern. Because when deporting cancer-stricken children can be reframed as parental choice, when habeas corpus can be misdefined as presidential privilege, when law-abiding students can be lumped in with violent criminals, and when cybersecurity is gutted during an era of escalating threats, then we're not talking about policy anymore, we're talking about a system that thrives on fear and spectacle. And here's the thought I'll leave you with, is this really about protecting the country, or is it about consolidating power by making ordinary people afraid? That's the choice America is staring down. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you believe these actions are about national security, or are they political theater dressed up as enforcement? I want to hear your take. If you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to hit like, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more fearless commentary. Because staying informed isn't just a choice, it's a responsibility. Stay alert, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.